Progress.
It's God.
Right, we're back from executive session, and we have a motion on the floor. Councilmember Lucarelli.
With permission from the person who seconded the consideration, the motion, I would like to withdraw the motion to adopt resolution number 00123.
As seconder, I have no objection to that.
Ron, and we'll bring it back at a future date. We're to item B, adoption of a resolution approving a multifamily tax exemption agreement for the Blueberry Apartments. Mr. Bond?
Yes, good evening, Council, Mayor. Since 2016, Port Orchard has offered a property tax exemption program to encourage the creation of multifamily housing pursuant to RCW 8414. The multifamily property tax exemption program exempts certain new, converted, or rehabilitated multifamily developments from ad valorem property taxation for either 8 or 12 years from the issuance of the certificate of exemption, depending on whether a project will include at least 20% of housing units to be available below market rents. The city has received a multifamily property tax exemption application from Blueberry Apartments QOZB LLC for the construction of 108 apartment units in 5 buildings on approximately 4.21 acres located in a designated tax exemption target area adjacent to Southeast Blueberry Road and Bethel Road Southeast. The developer is seeking an 8-year tax exemption. The property meets the criteria for an 8-year tax exemption, and as such, a multifamily housing exemption limited property tax exemption agreement has been prepared for approval. Staff recommends that the City Council approve a resolution authorizing the mayor to accept and sign a multifamily housing limited property tax exemption agreement between the city and Blueberry Apartments QOZB LLC as presented.
Councilmember Rosa Pepe.
Mayor, I move to adopt a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a multifamily housing limited property tax exemption agreement between the city and Blueberry Apartments QOZB LLC as presented.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Rosa Pepe, a second by Councilmember Diener. Are there questions for Mr. Bond on this matter?
No, I think, and if I misspeak, please correct me, Mayor, that, when we talked about this at Finance Committee, and Nick alluded to it earlier, we are looking at possible changes as we move forward to making sure we can get more affordable housing. If the programs aren't quite working the way we need them to, we're willing to change them, look at them and propose changes. So this is a step under our current code. And so I appreciate the work that you and your staff are doing on this, Nick, to make sure we're trying to stay current and helping the citizens of our city to the best of our ability.
Thank you.
The body of work from our housing action plan is going to inform the code changes, and I think we recognize in particular we're getting an abundance of garden apartments, and we want to turn that down or turn it off, and we're not seeing the mixed-use development that we would like to see in housing that could benefit our community. So, but we need to complete the body of work before we start making code changes. Councilmember Shang?
In general, I have concerns about the tax exemption because it means the city is giving up revenue for 8 years. I don't know if we even know how much revenue we're giving up in property tax. Do we know, is it 50,000 or 100,000 per year? But that's one concern I have. The second concern is when we're not paying or when we're not receiving that property tax evaluation, or I'm sorry, when the developer is not paying that amount, my understanding is that amount, the liability is spread amongst all the other taxpayers in the county. So someone is paying for that even if it's not the developer. And lastly, while this does offer more variety of multifamily housing, it does not address affordable housing. So I'm going to be voting against this motion.
I don't believe it causes a tax shift, is what you were referring to, but I'll let Councilmember Clausen, do you want Mr. Bond to speak to that first, or?
Sure, go
Well,
ahead.
I can tell you, Noah and I were discussing this beforehand, and Councilmember Chang had brought this up to me, and I was discussing it with Noah. I agree. We don't think it causes a tax shift. It does reduce the total city levy by a small amount. I think we determined for the other project that was approved last year that also received an 8-year exemption, it was about a $40,000 hit to the city's annual property tax revenue, but that was a bigger project. So we would expect this hit to be maybe proportionately a little bit smaller, but until we actually get our tax calculation, I don't think we'll know the exact cost.
Yeah, and I think I'll just add on to Nick's comments. We've talked about this several times. It's always hard to assess the real financial impact to a city because if the exemption is an incentive that creates the project itself, then the project itself is generating jobs, sales tax, sewer connection fees, water connection fees, so other revenues that are coming into the city to help us build out our infrastructure. The property tax exemption is most definitely a benefit because they do, not pay that. And so our levy is reduced as well as our assessed value. So it's kind of a tango, as we talked about before, the complexity of the property tax. They both are reduced going forward. So it's not a complete 100% tax shift as you were talking about. But I think it is more complex than just saying we forego $25,000 to $40,000 of property tax revenue, and that's the loss to the city. I think you have to look at in the whole context is what's the benefit that the city is receiving from other revenue sources, as well as the generation of jobs, sales tax, and housing.
And I would also add that I spoke to one of our developers recently because we've had a lot of new apartments constructed in the last few years, and several complexes are under construction right now. And they're saying, what they told me, I asked them the question, have you noticed that competitors in older complexes are having to lower prices or become more aggressive in terms of marketing their properties? And so even though we're building new units at market rate that don't have an affordability requirement in this instance, I think increasing supply in the city is having an effect by driving down rents at other complexes when those renters choose to move to a nicer, newer apartment complex. You're seeing some benefits there just in terms of increasing supply.
Councilmember Clausen?
Yeah, and I think, as you mentioned, Mayor, this is an issue that we have already decided. We established this program years ago, and these developers are bringing their projects forward following the guidelines that we've approved. So I think it's kind of, it's after the horse has gotten out of the barn, and so to speak. And what the mayor mentioned, I think, is very appropriate, that as we move forward, we can make changes to these regulations for future development. But I personally think it's really unfair for us to penalize folks that are following our current policies.
I respect that argument, and I understand that we want to give developers certainty. I know that not all the developments, however, are using this tax exemption.
Correct.
So you wonder why certain ones do. The one last year, I believe, that did use it, and they were not committed to do any affordable housing. But looking at their website and seeing that they are charging like studios starting at $14.99, it sort of gave me heartburn that they got an 8-year tax exemption and they're charging quite high market rate on their units, which is certainly their prerogative. But it didn't feel good to me, even though this is something that we did set up. And I figure if I have the ability to say no, I'm going to vote against it because it doesn't feel right to me.
But just because they advertise that market rent, that's not how you derive the rent for the affordable units, Fred. I mean, there's a formula for that through, a
Yeah,
government
and
agency, and so
comes
that's
up-
just because they're advertising that to be their peak rent. The units that they have to make available for affordable housing is not a part of that. And Noah is spot on with, you just can't look at the property tax. This was a vacant lot in many cases. There was really no property taxes before. And if you look at the way our city receives revenue, the property tax piece is a small percentage. And so when you look at the creation of jobs, you look at the creation of sales tax, you look at the different fees, we're definitely money ahead even with that, and we're providing back with affordable housing. And so I think it's a program that, as a council, we looked, to enact a few years ago. It's been working. It might be time to slow things down, But I think, you know, to John's point, that this were the rules that we put out there, these developers have gotten this far, and I think we need to honor those commitments. And if we want to change moving forward, I think now's the time to have that conversation, because I think it has. I think it's worked. I think we've encouraged development. We've encouraged affordable housing as a part of that. And I'll definitely be voting in favor of all three of these tonight.
Sherry?
Yeah, while I'm disappointed in the number of, actually zero number of low-income, low-market units available with this particular complex, they will be bringing in impact fees that will help us build out Bethel, which we sadly need. So I will be voting for this particular piece here.
Councilman Clausen, you have another remark?
Yeah, just for refreshing my memory, when we dealt with this policy initially, we were looking at having two goals. One was to encourage multifamily development, hence the 8-year exemption, and to encourage multifamily development with some affordable units within there, hence the 12-year. You don't get 12 years without providing some affordable units. You can only get 8. So that's why this particular project is only going to be approved for 8, because they're not providing affordable units involved. So I don't know about this particular one, but in essence, that was the discussion.
Further remarks on the table? All right, you'll be voting on a resolution approving a multifamily property tax exemption agreement for the Blueberry Apartments. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Nay.
One opposed. We're to item C, adoption of a resolution approving a multifamily property tax exemption agreement for the Salmonberry Apartments. Mr. Bond, this is you.
All right, thank you. I'm only going to read the second half of the staff report concerning this specific application. The city received a multifamily property tax exemption application from Family Legacy Development, LLC, for the construction of 24 new apartment units in 2 buildings on a 1.29-acre site located in a designated tax exemption area adjacent to Southeast Salmonberry Road and Bethel Road Southeast. The developer is seeking a 12-year exemption and intends to provide 20% of the units in the complex, that's 5 total units, at below market rents in accordance with Port Orchard Municipal Code Section 3.28040. The project meets the criteria for a 12-year tax exemption, and as such, a multifamily housing limited property tax exemption agreement has been prepared for approval. The staff recommendation is to approve the tax exemption agreement as presented. And if council would like, I did pull up some additional information based on the testimony we heard tonight. I'd like to share what fair market rents are in Port Orchard on the TV. And our code requires that we rent these units at 10% below fair market rents, which are established by HUD. So Housing and Urban Development provides annual information. Let's see here. So this is the HUD table for 2023, which I'm going to try to zoom in on. For an efficiency, which is like a studio unit, the fair market rent is considered $1,252. So our code requires us to rent these units at 10% below fair market value for each of these unit sizes. In addition, our code requires that we rent the units to people at certain income levels. So the studio units that are affordable have to be rented to somebody who makes 40% of median family income for the city of Port Orchard. So it's essentially reserved for people of a certain income level and gets a 10% discount below fair market rent as established by HUD, which, as Councilmember Chang pointed out, one of the new complexes was renting studios, I think he said, for $1,400 and change. The actual fair market rent
$1,499.
Yeah, so the actual fair market rent is $1,252. So that's probably closer to 25 or 30% below market rent in Port Orchard, which is different than the fair market rent that our code references.
And a 10% discount on that.
Exactly.
And I just want to correct you there. You said we a number of times. The city isn't renting. The apartment complex is renting and meeting this criteria. So, Councilmember Clausen, did you have another remark? Okay, I'm sorry. And so, I got lost here. Do we have a motion? No? What, would you like to make a motion?
That's why I'm raising my hand.
Okay, that's what it was, okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt the resolution authorizing the mayor to accept and sign a multifamily housing limited property tax exempted agreement between the city and Family Legacy Development LLC as presented.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Clausen, a second by Councilmember Trenary. I'm going to give that one to you. Further comments? You'd like to make another comment?
I like this plan a lot better than the last one because I felt the last one did not do anything for affordable housing. My concern with this one, though, is that the discount that we have mentioned is 10% or greater. If you compare that to our low-income utility of 25%, the 10% I think just pales, and I don't think it's enough. So I will be voting against this and the next.
And I hear your remarks, and that is some of the discussion we've been having, but we're waiting once again on the Housing Action Plan to inform what those subsidies should be to making, because they need to be more, I agree, they need to be more meaningful. But, not quite fair, in my opinion, to change the rules partway through a process on someone, so. Other comments? Okay. You'll be voting on the adoption of a resolution approving a multifamily tax exemption agreement for the Salmonberry Apartments. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And one opposed?
No.
And so we're to item D, adoption of a resolution approving a multifamily tax exemption agreement for the 2102 Sedgwick Apartments. Mr. Bond?
Right, the city received a multifamily tax exemption application from 2102 Sedgwick LLC for the construction of 192 new apartment units in 9 buildings on a 5.7 acre site located in a designated targeted area on Southeast Sedgwick Road, adjacent to the recently constructed Pottery Creek Apartments just east of Fred Meyer. The developer is seeking a 12-year tax exemption and intends to provide 20% of the units, that's 40 units, at below market rents in accordance with Port Orchard Municipal Code Section 3.28040. The project meets the criteria for a 12-year tax exemption, and as such, a multifamily housing limited property tax exemption agreement has been prepared for approval. Staff recommends approval of the agreement as presented.
For Clausen.
Mayor, I move to adopt a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a multifamily housing limited property tax exemption agreement between the city and 1202 Sedgwick LLC as presented.
Second.
By Councilmember Clausen, second by Councilmember Diener. Any comments on this one or questions?
Yeah, I would just make one more comment that maybe hasn't been made tonight. And, there are economic factors that are more powerful than I think even some of the things that we can do. But by doing nothing and not having additional development here in Port Orchard, we further reduce supply, and demand continues to increase. And so, one of the other things that's happening here is with new supply coming to the market has the opportunity to, create larger vacancy rates, which then will impact rents going down. And if we do nothing and supply continues to stay stagnant, demand continues to increase, pricing will increase. It's just the basic laws of economics. So I think there's also a piece of this that by increasing supply in our community, we have an opportunity to obviously or also positively impact rents.
Councilmember Lucarelli.
If I remember correctly, part of the incentive was to have development take place in areas where we were hoping to see development and we didn't. It was an incentive to bring more development into areas that were not as desirable as some, and it's worked. And so we're actually seeing the success, and we probably need to step back and look at continuing it in the future, because we are starting to meet some of the demands, and as you've said, it's meeting certain areas but not others. So this is making good on our commitments and then stepping back and looking at the future. So thank you.
Councilmember Clausen.
Yeah, and I would just like to add, if I did my arithmetic correctly, I think we just added 25 units, new units that are going to be into that below market rate. So at least it's a step now. Whether it's sufficient enough, I agree with you, Fred. I think we could do better, and that's why we need to revisit this policy. But by our actions tonight. We just added 25 affordable units in the city. And they're not secondhand unit, these are new units that are available for folks, so.
Comments? Go ahead.
I'll just say that I appreciate the discussion tonight, and I think several valid points have been made, and Fred, you've made some good points as well, and I'm looking forward to the housing action plan and how we retool this a little bit.
Most deliberation we've had on anything in probably 4 or 5 years. Maybe other than lodging tax. All right, other comments, questions? All right, you'll be voting on the adoption of a resolution approving a multi-property tax exemption agreement for the 2102 Sedgwick Apartments. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
Nay.
And one opposed. We're to our last business item, which is the adoption of a resolution authorizing the payment of additional relocation benefits to Ocean and Arlene Williams for the Bay Street Pedestrian Pathway Project. Mr. Lang?
Thank you, Mayor. In 2022, the city purchased Kitsap County tax parcel 4027-023-017-0004 from Ocean and Arlene Williams as a necessary acquisition for the Bay Street Pedestrian Pathway Project. Prior to the purchase and in accordance with the city's relocation assistance program, the Uniform Relocation Act 42 U.S.C. Chapter 6061, Chapter 8.26, Revised Code of Washington, and Chapter 468-100 Washington Administrative Code, the city authorized the payment of relocation benefits at the recommendation of the city's relocation agent, Tierra Right-of-Way Services Limited, to the Williams in accordance with resolution number 033-22, right-of-way acquisition procedures, and the city's relocation assistance program. By resolution number 033-22, the city council authorized payment of moving benefits in the amount of $8,000 and 12-month temporary storage relocation benefits in the amount of $4,440 payable in 3-month increments of $1,110. During the move, the city's relocation agent identified additional personal property that required moving that was not disclosed during the initial walkthrough of the property prior to the sale. Tierra recommends, and staff have reviewed and concur, the council authorized the payment of an additional $3,180 in reimbursable moving costs based on the actual cost of the move, which increased from the original $8,000 authorized due to the undisclosed additional personal property. Please note all expenditures associated with the Bay Street Pedestrian Pathway Project have been identified within the project funding estimate and are grant eligible. The city's relocation agent and staff recommends the payment of an additional $3,180 in moving costs for a total authorized payment of relocation benefits to Ocean and Arlene Williams of $15,620 for the Bay Street Pedestrian Pathway Project, broken down as follows. Previously approved initial relocation move payment in the amount of $8,000. Previously approved moving storage benefit in the amount of $4,440. An additional relocation move payment of $3,180.
I move to adopt a resolution authorizing the payment of an additional $3,180 in relocation benefits to Ocean and Arlene Williams for the Bay Street Pedestrian Pathway Project, and authorizing the mayor to execute all necessary documents.
Second.
By Councilmember Trenary, second by Councilmember Lucarelli. Any questions for Mr. Lang on this? I think it's pretty straightforward. Just additional expenses that are authorized or appropriate.
I gotta ask, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So we paid relocation benefits in the amount of $4,440 payable in 3 monthly increments of $1,110. That only comes, what, say again?
Doesn't add up.
It only comes to $3,330. I assume there was an initial payment of $1,110.
Correct. 3-month increments for a total of a year would be 4 payments, if I'm not mistaken, Charlie.
Yep, okay.
Apologies.
Scrivener.
Doesn't affect.
It doesn't affect anything. It just was throwing me off for a second.
No problem. All right. Other questions or comments, other than the math error?
City math?
All right, you'll be voting on adoption of a resolution approving the payment of additional relocation benefits to Ocean and Arlene Williams. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously. So I've got a discussion item here tonight, and Brandy, if you could bring this up, and you may want to follow this on your devices because the screen probably there's going to be, this is a public opinion survey that the Association of Washington Cities did, and I was at a recent mayor's exchange, and they shared this data, and this data is really intended to educate the legislature this session, and as they make actions, take their actions this legislative session. So the first slide, Brandy, if you could scroll down. Interviews were 500 people. They were likely 2022 voters, and the survey was done in December of this past year. A margin of error is believed to be 4.4% plus or minus, and the interviews were conducted via telephone, email, and text to web, and it was anonymous who was surveying them and why. You can see the demographics on this next page, gender, education. It's primarily Western Washington were the folks, and it was skewed a little bit. Nearly 50% were 50 years and older, and you can see that it was 39% large cities, 23% small cities, and then 38% unincorporated. And you wouldn't believe how many people think they live in a city because they got a Port Orchard address or or other communities, and so they associate with the city, but even though they don't live in a city because they've got a Port Orchard address. They were asked to prioritize, and you can see very similar to the survey. While we only had 5 categories, the top and the bottom are the same as our survey. I thought that was interesting. Public safety and crime reduction was 1, and we love our parks, but we don't want to pay for them. And so that was really, and that kind of rang true in our survey too. Public safety comparison. So it's been a while since I've looked at this. So, whether it was a high priority, 86% said that improving public safety and crime reduction, and you compare that to 2021, where 72% thought that was the highest priority. And which government should be responsible? And you can see here, the blue is the legislature, and the orange is cities, and this is about missing middle housing primarily, and should we have local control over our zoning? That first question. The criminal laws that they feel that the state and who could raise taxes, a mixed bag there, and who should regulate businesses, and favored a little bit to the state, but a bit to cities too. Local decision making is popular, as the next slide, and the state should be able to override laws in my community, and 54% disagreed. Local governments should be more connected than the state government to community needs, and can laws that reflect our community values. 81% agree with that. Local government is in a better position than the state to make decisions on pressing community issues, 82%. And this is, Bainbridge Island probably is the tip of the spear on many things, and so sometimes from city to city, the regulations differ, and citizens find that frustrating to a certain extent. Housing is the next. So 68% of the voters prefer local government to make growth decisions. So our local government, our county government, I thought that was pretty powerful as we're having discussions with our, so these are forced choice questions. So you only had two alternatives. So the first was, it is clear that the housing market won't create more affordable housing on its own. To build substantially more housing that is affordable, we must increase the money government spends on it, and only 41% agreed with that. The alternative question was, we can make housing more affordable by allowing for more housing density throughout our cities with townhomes, triplexes, and condos in areas that allow for single-family homes. Natural market forces will drive costs down, and so almost 57% agreed with that statement. Residents believe that the affordable housing crisis is caused by private developers rather than overly restrictive zoning. And this was broken down by area. 51% in Eastern Washington believe that, and unincorporated 52. So it was roughly in the 50s everywhere. In large cities, that is more believed, that it's 62%. Let's see here, response to topic covered by AWC's Housing Solutions Group. So I participated in a task force and engaged with the governor's office and his staff. Last year, the governor was very fixated on zoning, and we really went through a process and educated him that it was more complex than just zoning. And we gave him that data of the 22,000 housing units short, and the governor's really pivoted to this wanting to fund subsidized housing. And so I have to commend him for that. There's still members of the legislature that disagree and are running bills that would preempt local control and dictate upzoning on every single family lot. And we feel at AWC feels very strongly, and I do too, that yes, we need to upzone, but in targeted areas associated with where it's appropriate, to road infrastructure, to public transportation, so we're not putting more cars on roads where it's not appropriate. So so this came from that work. So these questions came from that work group. So requiring more housing like apartments and condos in our city next to transit and buses. I think virtually everybody agrees with that, or most do. And requiring cities to build mother-in-law units and apartments and other ADUs, townhomes, and triplexes in areas with single-family homes. And we've adopted ADU units. There's cities and communities that aren't doing these things, and I think that's really where the attention needs to be. Requiring that everybody needs to do their part, but not use a broad brush approach to solve this crisis. Changing the law so that lodging tourist tax can be used to build workforce housing. This is really Chelan, Leavenworth, the San Juan Islands. They generate tremendous amounts of lodging tax, and yet they have workforce housing challenges. So we're advocating that this be allowed, being allowed use for lodging tax money in certain communities. And you can see things, so charging a new small tax on the state for real estate to fund construction of affordable housing projects. Many oppose that, and then banning single-family zoning in Washington State. You can see that most are very opposed to that, and so there's an opportunity to educate folks there. Public safety. This is the forced choice again. The first question is, high-speed pursuits are dangerous to the public and may have a disparate impact on certain community members. Officers should be able to pursue a suspect for serious violent and sexual crimes, and only when they have enough evidence to arrest them. And folks disagreed with that, and the statement that was agreed to at 79%. Well, high-speed pursuits can be dangerous. The new law goes too far and can lead to criminals evading the police and creating additional dangers to the community. Officers need to be able to pursue a fleeing suspect that they have reasonable suspicion that the person they are pursuing has committed a crime against a person, the risk of not apprehending to the person are greater than the risk of pursuit. And I think that that's very powerful that many feel that way. The Blake decision, and the Blake decision came about, a drug possession used to be a felony. The Blake decision struck that down. And so in this question, 69% agreed that it's great to offer drug treatment, but there should be consequences for those who refuse treatment. If people break the law and refuse treatment, they should be held accountable and subject to fines or jail time. There's two schools of thought right now at the legislature. I hope that one is the Oregon approach and decriminalizing all drugs, and there would be no consequences to possessing drugs. The other alternative, and where I hope this lands, is that it would be a gross misdemeanor, and that with therapeutic courts, and that you're going to be offered treatment, and if you don't, it won't be a felony, but it'll be a gross misdemeanor, but there could be jail time associated with that. The rub to that was, and I mentioned this to the governor when we met, was that a felony lands in Superior Court. A gross misdemeanor ends up in the courtroom across the hall, and we're not set up with a therapeutic court, nor do we have funding. And so if this comes about, we're going to need help with funding and setting up therapeutic courts. We conduct court 2 days a week here, and that would likely grow our court needs. But I think there definitely needs to be consequences, because because there's no consequences, very few are choosing treatment as an alternative, or a therapeutic court. Infrastructure, and I know I'm hijacking the meeting here, but I think this is important data. 66% of residents are concerned about the failing infrastructure, and we've been, so 66% are concerned, and 28% are very concerned, and only 34% were not concerned. We've been making concerted effort in our community to invest in our infrastructure. How do you feel your city responds to the residents of our needs of your residents? And you can see the data there. It's all pretty close to average in all sectors there. And another forced choice question here. Most residents want their city leaders to be civil and work together. And
Why are you looking
well,
at me?
we had deliberation tonight. It is ask our city attorney. She visits other cities, and sometimes it's hostile, and civility. There's always civility here, and I greatly appreciate all you for that. And you can see that the public expects us to act civil and not to be, antagonistic to each other. So that is the data, and I'm not going to answer any questions because I didn't do the survey. I just wanted to share it. So,
I would, just if you don't mind amplifying, and for Chief, this may fall on you. What is happening regarding the changes in the pursuit law? Are you seeing a groundswell? Maybe we're hoping. What's your take on it?
I certainly can't speak for any of the legislators. I think it's a little bit too early to tell. There's some, I would encourage you to read some of the stuff that came out from WASPIC today. Some of the information that has been put out by some legislators was strictly debunked by a Seattle University professor as being not ready for peer review. So I would encourage you to read that, but it remains to be seen.
element to this so there were 4 topics in our, and I'm diving into my mayor's report here. So I was one of 12 mayors that were invited to the governor's office, and I hadn't, being the president of AWC is why I was there. It was Redmond, it was Tacoma, it was Auburn, it was you know, much larger cities than us. And not only, it was just a fabulous, professionally, a fabulous experience for me, because not only was Port Orchard in the room, Port Orchard was leading conversation, and I led the dialogue, and it was, we talked about the homelessness, housing crisis, we talked about pursuits, and I shared data about the pursuits with the governor, and he was a little bit dismissive, but after the meeting and when everybody else was gathering for the picture, his staff came over to me and wanted more information about our data. I shared the data that I shared with you guys, that are, you know, over the last 2 years, our crimes against persons and property crimes are up 28%. We had 33 eludes last year. And so Chief put more data together. I forwarded it to the governor's office. So governor's staff is at least listening, whether we can get the legislate, you know, he signs the bill, you know, so we're lobbying to get change to happen there. It was, anyway, it was great. And then I already spoke to Blake. We talked about Blake. We talked about his proposal for funding more subsidized housing. And so it was a great meeting, and that very topic came up. And his staff, it was very interested in our data.
Thank you.
Let's go to council committee reports. And let's see, the first of which is Economic Development Tourism. I see you don't meet till the 27th, so I don't believe you've had a meeting yet. Utilities is next week, is it?
14th.
14th of February, excuse me. So you aren't meeting. And Finance met last week. And
Yes.
One of the topics was the utility program. Councilmember Clausen, you want to give your report?
Sure. The Finance Committee had a number of items on its agenda, one of which was the council deferred the city council compensation to the committee. We were presented with a lot of information regarding how we fit in relationship to cities in the county and kind of our peer group, what the options would look like if we kicked out the highest and the lowest and so on. We talked about the different methods for which compensations can be adjusted. One is that the council could make changes, but they don't go into effect until a new election and you're elected into that position. Or there is the option of creating a voluntary salary commission, a volunteer group, and that group, once they make a decision, it can be implemented almost immediately. The one thing that I found most interesting was that you can, and correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie, that when you establish a compensation, that you can also approve in advance COLA increases, a fixed COLA amount, so that say that the council decided that the position would get X, and each year thereafter it would be increased by 3% or whatever. So you can do that as part of the approval process. It's a pretty complex issue, and I don't know that the committee really settled on a specific one, other than suggesting this really needs to come to the full council at a work study, and the full council can look at the data and try to decipher whether an increase is justified. If so, what amount, and what kind of procedure we would like to use to implement that. We went over.
So we talked about, Debbie and Charlie and I, and they're working on additional data that you requested, in particular about the salary commission, and they think they're going to be ready to bring that forward to you guys as a discussion item at the end of February. So it's really not time sensitive, because it isn't, the trigger isn't filing, the trigger would be the actual election. So we've got more time than we thought.
I would just want to make sure that we have a block of time sufficient that we can have adequate discussion on it. So we talked about the sales tax and the REIT for the conclusion of the biennial budgets, and the sales tax came in significantly higher than what we initially thought. although it was pointed out that we've been making budget corrections throughout the year, so we've kind of allocated already those additional dollars that we've earned, if you will, from the sales tax. The REIT funds were good. They weren't nearly as strong as the sales tax income, but it was still positive. We talked about, this is more of a procedural thing, that the city has adopted a policy many, many years ago that the Finance Committee will sign off on all of the financial records, and you'll usually, Jay will have an example of, prior to the meeting, you see the three of us passing that around, signing all those documents, and those documents are documents that this council approves as part of the action. So it was kind of like, why are we signing something that the full council approves? So we're looking at making a policy change to where the Finance Committee doesn't necessarily have to sign a piece of paper, and hopefully we can reduce the amount of paper. We talked about the low-income utility program that we addressed here tonight, and we also talked briefly about potential of doing a borrowing to do the repairs and improvements to City Hall that we've all been talking about for quite a while. I guess the simplest way to look at it is that we're looking at taking out a home improvement loan, and we have some opportunities, and Noah's going to be doing some research for us to find out what options are available as soon as we know what the price tag is going to be. So, and then finally, we talked briefly, and I don't know, Mayor, if you want to address the issue with the parking downtown or not, but.
Yeah, I shared that with, our DNR lease that we control is in front of the Port of Bremerton's office where our marina pump station is, and we're about to dig a gigantic hole in the ground there. And it's going to displace their tenants and users of the marina that park there. Their property they own and lease is where the commuter lots are. And it is likely that they want their property back, and I'm hopeful that we can, I'm in negotiations with the port. There's 106 leased stalls there, public parking stalls that you can pay to park there. And my observation, it's about half full anymore since COVID. And the other thing that's changed, so teleworking has changed commute behavior, and so has the Southworth Ferry Dock. And I think it'd be rather abrupt. So about 50, 60 cars is about the most you're seeing down there anymore, buying parking, And I'm hopeful that we can retain some, paid parking down there, because it'd be rather abrupt to go from 106 to 0 overnight, but it is the port's lot. And I'm hopeful there's a portion of that lot in front of Peninsula Bev that's 4-hour parking. And I think it's very important to our businesses that we retain that too. The other concern is the farmer's market, and if they've got marina users filling that lot up, in particular on the weekend. So I did contact the farmer's market. I let them know that these changes are coming. I've also contacted Kitsap Bank, and they've actually offered their parking lot just outside the door here. Farmer's market wasn't real excited about that, but I said, well, it's an alternative. You're welcome to negotiate an agreement with the Port of Bremerton if you can, but I just wanted to give them an alternative, and that farmer's market is so important to our community, and I don't want to see it go away during all this construction. So there is an option for them to use Kitsap Bank's lot, and the bank was amenable to that. So more to come. The Port of Bremerton, the commissioners are talking about this too. We do derive, about $80,000 a year in revenue from that lot too, so it would be, a hit to the city there too. So, and I think that's part of why they want it too. So So with that revenue, maybe they will keep some of that paid parking, I would hope. All right,
That's it.
that's it. Okay, Transportation Committee, you met tonight,
Yeah,
Councilor
we
Chang?
met before this meeting, and I forgot to bring my notes. But two things that stood out was was it a grant possibility, Rob, where we're talking about a potential project at the bottom of Johnson Creek, which is where Bay and Port Orchard Boulevard meet. So that could become an estuary.
Yes.
So that was news to me. It's quite visionary. It's also would involve properties that are currently in use. So that was one item, and the bulk of the time was a good discussion on the speeding along Merrimack in McCormick Woods. You're smiling. There are people who live along this street who are very adamant, who are convinced that there are speeders just using the street, which is dangerous because of the slope and the speed and their proximity to the road. So we had some discussion, and one of the first steps is that Public Works, I believe Tony's department, is going to look into placing a couple additional signs, reminding them that the speed limit is 25 miles per hour, and looking into possibly adding a stop sign. There are also other alternatives that could be considered in the future.
More on that Johnson Creek estuary is that the state, is under the injunction for fish culverts, and there's a bridge that's going to be put in, actually. And then with that bridge, though, will go to nowhere other than our 36-inch culvert that goes underneath those buildings. And so the state is wanting to partner with us to make that bridge, and that was an estuary that was filled, and to return it to its natural state, so that there's some place for the fish to go other than just under a bridge. It's really a partnership with WashDOT, who is under the injunction, and other than about $5,000 in surveying at this point, they're pursuing a grant for about $5 million that would pay for the project. So we're participating with them in this grant application at this point. Festival of Chimes and Lights. Monday is a meeting, okay. Planning for Christmas next year. Land use is January 25th, I see. Tomorrow, okay. Lodging tax, no meeting till February?
Report last meeting.
Okay. Sewer advisory is until March. And I see the council retreat, and one of the things in my mayor's report, at the mayor's exchange, many cities aren't calling them a retreat because it just doesn't have the right connotation to it. They're calling it a strategic planning session. Theme with calling it a strategic planning
How
session.
about a catered lunch or something?
It comes with that. Strategic planning sessions come with a catered lunch.
I've heard them called advances before instead of a retreat.
Advances?
Yeah, just,
Advances?
yes.
Most cities
Seriously, I've heard that
are
before.
calling them strategic planning sessions. That was one of my takeaways from the mayor's exchange. So, with your indulgence, that's the term I.
Retreat.
Yeah. Retreat. Oh,
Yeah.
goodness.
It is great.
Call it what you want.
Yeah, call
Call it what you want.
That is the important part.
The agenda is the important part. All right. Okay. Moving on to my report, I've tackled quite a bit of it. Another thing that came from the mayor's exchange, and a lot of talk about homelessness, and one of the things I got from other mayors, we can either continue what's going on in many communities, which isn't working, unstructured encampments that provide no services, or we can get behind facilities like what the county is attempting to do up on Mile Hill, that will have rules structured and provide services. There's really only two paths, and every time you go to site facilities, though, everybody, I think, agrees we need them, but not in my neighborhood. And so we just need to change it. I think the messaging here, we got two choices, either the unstructured mess that we've got, or finding a path forward to create facilities that have structures and rules and helping the people that do want help. So it's just pretty. The afternoon part of our session was, I don't know if you remember, former newscaster Megan Black, and she works as the public information officer for the Bellevue Police Department and has for about 3 years now. And a statistic she shared, which I'm not a social media person, but this is powerful. 60% of our population uses social media for the only source of news and information. It's the only place they get their news and information. So the takeaway from that is we need to be newsmakers by telling our own story, because if we're not, other people that don't have our best interest at heart are creating negative stories. And so I have talked to our contract public information officer, and we're going to strive to put some piece of information out once a week. And that's as a starting point. And we might need to revisit his contract at the end of the year, because I might end up spending 2 years worth of money in 1 year. But I think it's important that we tell our story.
Hey, Rob, can we take that to work study and talk about that a little bit more? Yeah.
The retreat?
Strategic
plan?
The advance, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Strategic lunch.
Strategic lunch, okay. There's lunch at the end, you gotta earn it. We work all day. Did I talk about the Givens Park and the Rotary Club? Okay, I couldn't remember if I did or not. The Port Orchard Rotary Club is interested in assisting with the sports courts, the pickleball courts up at Givens. We've got a grant to fund half of it, and they're willing to help. And they've also reached out to the Morning Rotary Club and are talking to them. So we might get some help from the community to help fund the other half of that grant. Reminder, our next meeting on the 14th is the same time as City Action Days down in Olympia. So Mayor Pro Tem will be running the meeting on the 14th, so be nice to him. And I'll know tomorrow for sure and send an email when we go over agendas tomorrow morning. And I've been putting more into these meetings, and I hear Councilmember Clausen, he wants to have a good amount of time to talk about the council's pay topic, and because it's meaty. So if we can't fit it, so we may not have a work study again next month, because I'm trying to make bigger meetings, more bigger meetings than versus having 1 hour meetings 3 times a month or hour and a half meetings. So I'll let you know after we assess, but it looked like the 28th, at least 2 weeks ago, didn't have really anything on it. And if that's still the case, we'll have that discussion item and then the business stuff of paying the bills and that kind of stuff on there. I've got a request from the Port of Bremerton to provide a letter of support for their breakwater project. Everybody's head is nodding that I think it's one of the things on our legislative agenda. I didn't think there was any. And then I want to share, last thing I have, I need to share, Brandy, you're going to need to allow me to share my screen.
Are you on Zoom?
I'm not. Doggone it, I've messed up here. I'm going to email you this. That's going to be the easiest way. So we got for the shoreline, for the deck rail, and what that looks like. So just bear with me a second here.
You could log in and talk at the same time, right?
Why don't we go to staff reports? You guys start around the room while I email this to Brandy. Tony, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to report that we've seen the last of the king tides for this year. So hopefully we get another 10 to 11 month reprieve for Bay Street. I've also initiated a discussion with the Makah tribe for the totem pole refurbishment. So thank you, Councilman Clausen, for the background on the late council member and the ceremony associated with that. So more to come. Thank you.
No one?
I just wanted to mention to the council, you probably saw it today in the emails I put out for our AP packets. There was 6 packets included, which you approved tonight, but the last one that we did this afternoon was for the Roland property purchase. So we finally closed. Closing's on Friday. We approved the AP packet today. We'll wire funds tomorrow. So it'll be a new storm property that we'll have in our asset book. So pleased to have that one put away.
Yeah, one announcement: a week from tonight, we are having our first open house for the 2024 Comprehensive Plan Update for the city's comprehensive plan. So I certainly encourage members of the public to find out more. We have a website for the comprehensive plan update, and we'll be giving some presentations, doing some workshop type stations around the room, gathering input from the public. And at this point in time, I have not heard from a majority of council or planning commissioners that any of you plan to attend in a number that would require public notice. But as a reminder, if you do plan to attend, please let us know so that we can advertise the meeting as a public meeting.
Nothing to report this evening. Thank you.
Chief?
Still continuing to do good stuff with recruitment. We have one new hire in background, and we have one lateral applicant in background, and then we have more interviews again this Thursday morning. And then I did send everyone our annual review and assessment of our strategic plan. So if you've got any questions about what we have accomplished over the last year, or what we are adding to that, please feel free to give me a call or send me an email. But thank you.
Have anything?
All right, so I thought I would share with the council, and I think based on previous discussions tonight that this might be timely. So every year, 211 reaches out to our office to see if there's any information that we want to provide to them, so that way when they receive calls, they can guide them in the direction that for the need of the people. And so I have the report. I'd be happy to send it to the council when I'm done. But when you look at this report, it talks about, so just, I guess I'll back up for a second. So 211 is an information phone line, hotline, that anybody in the state can call and reach out for different types of resources. So it could be for needing housing, needing food, needing more information about COVID-19, and it's all reported and tracked based by zip code, counties. So this was the first time that I've actually seen the report come to me via email 2 weeks ago, and I thought this would be important to share with the council. From a perspective of what is it that our community is needing help of. And so let me see if I can transfer over to the report here. So you can have access to the full report, which I just showed you on the website in each of the previous years. You can also, which I found was kind of interesting, that you can go to the community data, and of that, you can break it down by jurisdiction, which is zip code. So I broke it down from our two zip codes, which is 98366 and 98367. You can put a custom date. Just curious, what was the number of calls that the state received specifically within those two zip codes? And in comparison throughout the whole state is not a huge number, but 2,063 calls were received to 211 from members of our community. And as you can tell, 20% was looking for some sort of help, housing and shelter. And they talk about what is that? It's for helping somebody pay or find low-cost emergency or other places to live. And then when you look at that, it breaks it down to even more, that 32.6% of that 20% was looking for low-cost housing. And the report just kind of goes into other different categories. Again, 10.5% for food, 45% of that 10%, I know a lot of percentages here, needed help buying food. Again, these are people calling, needing assistance from City of Port Orchard zip codes. So I just wanted to share that with you, and I think that I was going to reach out to them to see if we can provide to them some services that the city offers that they may not be aware of. And one is the new program that you guys are going to reach out that Noah's office is heading up, and feed that to the information. So although if they're not on social media, or if they're not getting a utility bill, they're reading their statements because they're not the property owner, maybe 211, if they do call, can give them that access to that information. So that's what I have to share for you tonight. I'll put this on the city's website, post it on Facebook, and send it
email
out
it
to
to
the
the
council.
council too? Because it's really tough to read that data.
Yeah,
from up
it's
here.
pretty small, but I just wanted to bring your guys' attention that this service is out there. And I don't know if you caught the report, but so 211 is for community information, community resources. 988 is for suicide intervention and crisis support, and then 911 is for emergency. So this is all together, and the report goes into somewhat detail of what all that consists of, how they get their funding, and how they're to help communities throughout the state. So that's what I have to share.
Debbie, do you have anything to report from HR?
I do not, thank you.
All right. And then, Brandy, you can pull that slide back up. Finance Committee, I see it's to be determined. We typically meet the night, we would be meeting on the 21st at 5. Does that still work with everybody's schedule? And would you prefer, we met virtually this last time, virtually or in person? What's your preference?
In person, since it's before a meeting.
Well, we might not have that meeting.
Yep, then it'd be virtual.
Okay, so if we don't have the meeting, we'll go virtual. If we have the meeting, then we'll meet ahead of the meeting. Is that fair? And make sure everybody's.
It's just hard from virtual to get here.
Yeah.
If we're having a meeting, so if you would indulge and have it either way.
That, it's your meeting. I'm just asking which way you'd like to have it.
Thank you. If that's okay with the chair.
Work for everybody?
5 o'clock.
That work for you, Sean?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Jay?
Yep.
That's our typical meeting night. Okay, so we had a meeting with Rice Fergus Miller and the team this past week, and I'm sorry, Brandy, can you zoom in on that just a little bit? And there we go. So this slide really isn't any different. It's just showing some dimensions on the deck, the pathway that would get us down to the beach, and so that deck would be 100 by 27. And if you go to the next slide, actually 2 slides, Brandy, that one. So we have a requirement in our grant that we got to allow a light to get through the deck. And so this is an idea, it's somewhat similar to there were a lot of lessons learned on the Seattle waterfront that we're gonna take advantage of. Some things worked and some didn't, and our engineering team is aware of that. You're seeing how it continues onto the pathway. That won't be glass blocks, and these will likely be spread a little farther apart than what's depicted here. It'll likely be some sort of a brick or something that simulates the same effect to get that stripe that they're talking about. That I thought that was kind of, it might even actually continue out into that patio area there just outside the door. So the next element that they shared with, from the maintenance of the railings that we've done, the railings that we've got on our pathway are a bit of a maintenance challenge for Public Works. Kids like to climb them, stretches them, they get broken. And every time we've awarded a contract for, while those cables look the same, none of them are the same. And getting the right piece to splice into that, many times it involves taking 200 feet of cable out and completely restringing it with something different. And so this deck also is envisioned to be able to put 2 large tents on it, 20 by 40 tents on it. And we want to be able to anchor to the railing those tents so they don't blow off and you don't have to put concrete buckets on the deck. So the deck, if you've been to Vancouver's waterfront and the ship prow that they've got on their waterfront, they've got a really nice robust railing there. And it looks like chain link, but it is chain link actually, but it's stainless steel chain link. And the panels can then be unbolted and replaced as needed. So that's, you can see what we have currently and what, and so it would be around the deck and then down over to that railing. So I just wanted to I know it's, I'm not saying chain link, but it,
I think the term was mesh. It's a stainless steel mesh.
Stainless steel mesh, there we go. So that's, we still don't have costs, you're right, I saw your
Well, just for links, stainless steel links would be expensive.
yeah. And, but we do need something much more robust in this application because people are gonna stand and lean on it differently than just a barrier, you know, passing along our pathway. So, and I think that's it. So I just wanted to share those concepts that were shared with Nick and I at our last meeting.
Could you also send that so we can see it better? Or?
Certainly. Brandy, could you, I've emailed to you, could you share it with the council? Absolutely.
It's hard to see. Thank you.
Yeah. That concludes my report. We are to our second citizen comment period. So anyone wishing to address the council, sir? Are you wishing to address the council? Thank you for being patient this evening.
Okay. Hello, Mayor and council members. My name is Robert Doherty, Port Orchard. I'm sure all of you are pretty familiar with Bethel Avenue. I travel it quite often. At the, more or less at the south end of the real busy part is the Fred Meyer store at Bethel Avenue and Sedgwick Road. On the west side, I call it the west side of the Fred Meyer store, the Fred Meyer parking lot, there's an entrance exit location. Last year, June 2nd, that'd be 2022, I was involved in a minor accident coming out that exit. I understand that the city of Port Orchard owns, the city limits come up to the Fred Meyer store at the very end, right where the county put their new pavement, you know, in that area. I think you know that area pretty well. Anyway, I guess I understand that, you know, that is in the Port Orchard city limits, so I'm wondering what's going to be done about that area. I know there's been some other accidents there. A good friend of mine was in an accident, and he actually had to get a settlement from the other person's insurance company. He had neck injuries. There's probably been more accidents than I know about, and I'm sure than you know about even in that area. So I guess my big question is what's going to be done about that area there? I'm not a civil engineer, so I have no solutions. I'm a mechanical engineer, so I'd like to hear from you on that about what you might do to that area.
Okay. We don't have any current plans for that area. In particular, Sedgwick is a state highway. That Bethel Road is the city road, but the Sedgwick is a state highway. So that intersection improvements there are, more challenging than just a city street where it's all four corners are the city. So we do have significant improvements, a project farther down Bethel at this end of town, and we're also starting a segment, design of a segment at Salmonberry and Blueberry and a complete street in that segment there. But we do have it in our long range plans to improve that. Bethel's broken into 5 segments, and right now we've got one segment of it that will be going to construction this year. And then our next project in line for that is likely the Salmonberry and Blueberry improvements. So.
That whole Fred Meyer area there is getting very busy. It's increased in the car traffic's increased tremendously in the last decade. I've only been in this county for 72 years, so I've seen quite a bit of development here. And I think that area needs a little more attention. I'm not sure what to do with that area, but it's Fred Meyer would I think they should really put some center lines on that exit also, because there's people wanting to turn right or left. Of course, there's no road straight ahead in that area, but I think they need to do something too to help eliminate, you know, future incidents there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, appreciate your comments. Mr. Bott?
I was just going to comment, we do have the Bethel-Sedgwick corridor plan online that we completed in 2018. We're also, as part of the comp plan process for 2024, which we're kicking off a week from tonight at 6 o'clock or 6:30 in this room, we are also creating a sub-area plan for the Bethel corridor, so we are going to be doing some further planning in the Bethel corridor, and so that's an opportunity for you to provide input as we come up with more detailed plans beyond just roadway improvements.
Thanks for that, Nick. Anyone else wishing to? You certainly get 3 more minutes. Come on up.
Hi, my name is Danielle Rembert. I really appreciate the discussions that you guys have had about the housing crisis that's happening across the nation and especially in our community. I moved here when Fred Meyer was just a field, and with the new developments that are coming in, we know that the traffic is probably going to, doubly increase on top of that. Just to go back to the numbers that we discussed this evening, I'm really excited about, your plan that you presented regarding, water assistance, but like I said before, the median income in Port Orchard is $45,000, and so the 10% income is about $20,000, which is still $1,500 a month, and you can't even rent the studio apartment at the lowest income for that. So anybody that's making less than that probably won't even have a utility bill to be able to pay. So that's something to consider in regards to your plan there. But also, I just wanted to say that I also think that the density improvement, or adding to density in our city is really important. To have things close to resources and filling the deficit for the need for housing in our area. But we also have to remember that even though the actual population of Port Orchard is like 13,000. We also have the undefined Kitsap district surrounding that, the 45,000 people in Bremerton seeking housing within city limits, Alala, Gorst, Belfair, et cetera. And so although you guys did approve all of the new development, I heard the word unfair to those people because this is the policies we set in place. But I feel like now that you've approved those and you have 25 units, which is like 0.001% of our population of 13,000 just in our city limit, it's not really a big enough dent. And now maybe that you've approved those, that going forward, you can relook at the policy or the coding that's in there for housing and new developments, because maybe 10% is not as much of a discount as we need. And the other thing that I don't know about that is they're giving that 8-year or 12-year discount, but does that, when that expires, are they still having to require, or are they still having to provide the low-income housing? And who is that actually going to serve? Because if they have units that are $1,600, $2,000, whatever, and they provide 5 units that are $1,400, there's like 5 people squeezing into one space because they can't afford more than that. Like I said before, I'm a small business owner. I still fall within the 50% and below because I'm an artist. But I've managed to make a living and provide for my family. I'm a single mother, though, and I have a son that's, entering into an adulthood with a disability. And so I will probably also be providing for him for his adult life. And so, there's all those different factors that are in consideration. Thank you for listening today.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. Anyone else wishing to address the council? All right, we'll close the citizen comment period. Go to the order. Go ahead, Councilmember Rosebeffy.
I'd like to thank everybody that came tonight and made your comments. It's very helpful on the council to hear people come in and give us their opinions and facts. So thank you for being here tonight, and please encourage other people to come.
Brandy, I didn't, do we have anybody online wishing to?
We did not. I've been watching.
Okay, I just totally forgot about the online side of it. Anything else for the good of the order? Okay, our meeting is adjourned.